All right, welcome to the deep dive. You guys know the drill. You send us the source material, and we get to work. And this time, you've thrown us a real curveball.
The complete book of stretching. It's in the title. This thing is massive.
Complete is an understatement. I mean, where do you even begin with a book like this? It's got stretches for your ears, your toes, and everything in between. So we're going to try to, distill this beast down to something a little more manageable. If you're looking for some key movements for overall flexibility and well-being, we're going to try to pick out the ones that give you the most bang for your buck, as they say.
You don't want to get lost in the weeds with this book. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
But I will say, before we get too far, the book does a good job of driving home some key principles for stretching. It emphasizes doing each stretch 6 to 8 times, which I like. It's not about just going through the motions. You got to settle into the stretch, relax, breathe deeply. And this is a big one. No bouncing or forcing, just gentle, consistent movement.
Easy does it. Yeah, definitely. No pain, no gain does not apply here. Okay, so shoulders, let's start there. If you're dealing with that classic shoulder stiffness, maybe from sitting at a desk all day, what are some stretches that'll give you the biggest relief?
Well, the book actually has a ton of different shoulder stretches, which goes to show you how complex this joint is. It's more than just like one muscle. But for overall shoulder health, a great starting point is that simple cross-body stretch. You know, the one, reach across the body and grab the elbow, pull it gently across your body. That really gets into the posterior deltoid, which for a lot of us is super tight from, like you said, being hunched over a computer.
Oh yeah, that one's a lifesaver after a long day of work. And what about for the shoulder joint itself? Just keeping it moving smoothly.
Well, for joint mobility, you can't go wrong with good old-fashioned arm circles. Hold the hands pointed to the sides and make a large, gentle swings of the arms around the body. Your shoulder joint's like a ball and socket, and those circles help keep everything lubricated and moving through its full range.
So it's like giving your shoulders a little tune-up.
Exactly. Now, if you want to get a bit deeper, the book has a stretch specifically for the internal rotators. It's reach behind your body and grab the wrist of one arm, gently pull the wrist behind your back. Now, this one you got to be careful with if you have any tightness in the front of your shoulder. It can be intense.
It's a good one, though.
Yeah.
Really gets into those muscles that can get shortened from hunching forward.
And then it goes a step further with a variation that increases the intensity even more. It's while holding your wrist with the other arm, lean forward to stretch. Repeat to both sides.
Oh, I've done that one. That forward lean really does make a difference, doesn't it? How does that work?
Well, think about it. When you lean forward, you're not just stretching the shoulder capsule more, you're also starting to get into those upper back muscles as well. So it's like a 2-for-1 stretch.
I like those. Efficient.
And speaking of simple but effective, the book also mentions just shrugging your shoulders forward and backward to loosen them up. It might seem basic, but when you think about how much tension we hold in our upper traps and neck, it's actually really helpful for releasing that tightness and improving blood flow.
Yeah, sometimes the simplest things are the best. Okay, what else we got for shoulders?
Oh, there's a modified arm swing. It's hold the arms straight to the sides and swing them up as high as possible to the front. More of a dynamic movement, focusing on flexion and extension at the shoulder joint.
Okay, so we're warming things up a bit. I like it.
Exactly. And here's one that pops up a few times in the book, which tells me they really think it's important. It's that reach up and grab the tricep of the opposite arm and pull it across the body.
We've seen that a couple of times already. Why do you think they highlight this particular stretch?
Well, on the surface, it's a pretty standard tricep stretch. But because of where that triceps muscle attaches up around your shoulder, you're actually also getting a bit of a stretch in the posterior deltoid and even potentially in the lats. So it's like hitting multiple birds with one stone.
Multitasking at its finest.
Exactly. And then there's a stretch specifically for opening up the chest, which is so important for counteracting that hunched over posture we all tend to develop. It's place the arms on the back of the neck and flex them to stretch the chest and shoulders.
Oh, that's a good one. It feels like it's undoing all that damage from slouching.
And it is, in a way. Tight chest muscles can pull your shoulders forward, contributing to poor posture. Rounded shoulders, you know the drill. Yeah. So this stretch helps to open up those pectorals, the anterior shoulder muscles. Then the book gets into using external support to deepen the stretch, like with reach out and hold the wall while pulling the body forward.
Using the wall as a prop. Makes sense. How does that change the stretch?
Well, the wall gives you a fixed point to work against, so you can really isolate the stretch in your shoulder. It's like having a a partner to help you deepen the stretch without having to worry about balance.
That's actually really smart.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting into some more advanced stuff now. What else we got?
Oh, there's another variation on the tricep stretch. Reach up and grab the tricep of the opposite arm and pull it down across the back.
So instead of pulling across, we're pulling down. What's the difference there?
By pulling down, you're likely hitting a slightly different angle of the triceps muscle fibers. And you might also feel a stretch more along the lats, those big muscles on the side of your back.
Right.
Then there are some shoulder stretches that also get into the back muscles, like lean back against the bar and drop the body down as if doing a reverse dip. Use the legs for support. That's a bit more of a compound movement.
I see. So we're hitting multiple muscle groups at once.
Exactly. While the focus might be on the shoulders, you're also engaging the back and chest. It's a more holistic approach. And then we see that wrist grab with a forward lean again. So many different ways to target those shoulders.
It's like they're trying to cover every possible angle.
And they pretty much are. They even have another wall-assisted stretch. Lean out to the wall and hold one arm on the wall and you stretch forward. Similar idea to the first one, but a slightly different approach. And then there's a seated version using the wall.
Oh, yeah. Hold onto the wall while sitting and then stretch the body down and forward. Sitting down probably helps to stabilize things.
Right. It lets you really focus on the upper body and shoulder stretch without having to worry about balance. And then there's even a seated twist that gets into the shoulder.
Put one leg straight out while sitting and reach back with the opposite arm. Alternate arms. So now we're adding a rotation element.
Yes, and that rotation brings in the back as well. It's a great way to improve mobility in both the shoulder and the spine. We then circle back to a stretch for the posterior shoulder, reach back and grab the wrist and pull the arm across the back of the body. Yet another way to target those muscles we stretched with the cross-body movement at the beginning.
It's amazing how just changing your hand position can change the whole feel of the stretch.
It really is. And they also have a tricep stretch that emphasizes lifting the arm higher, like reach up and grab the tricep of the opposite arm and lift it up as far as possible towards the back.
So reaching high. Got it. Why the emphasis on the height?
Well, by lifting higher, you're probably getting into a slightly different part of the triceps muscle, and you might even be engaging more of that teres minor muscle, which is back there in the shoulder. It's all about finding those subtle variations that make a difference. Then they have a stretch that seems to hit the upper back, chest, and shoulders all at once.
Okay, lay it on me.
Hold the arms behind the head and then push them forward, trying to touch the elbows together.
Oh, yeah, I feel that one in my upper back and even in my chest.
And it's hitting those rhomboids and trapezius muscles in your back. And then, to top it all off, they have a full body reach.
Like stand very tall and reach up, then stretch up to the toes while reaching as high as you can. That's a good one.
It is. It's a reminder that your whole body is connected. Stretching isn't just about isolated muscles. It's about improving movement throughout your entire kinetic chain. And finally, they suggest just standing tall and shrugging your shoulders up and around to loosen them. A nice, gentle way to finish things off. All right, so let's shift gears and talk about ab stretches. If someone's looking for more core flexibility, what are some good options from this book?
Abs. Okay. Well, the book kicks things off with the basic crunch. Place the hands behind the head, feet on the ground, and then lift the feet while pulling the body off the floor. So we usually think of crunches as a strengthening exercise, but is there a stretching component to them too?
You know, it's interesting. While crunches are definitely great for building abdominal strength, there is a subtle stretching element as well. When you lower back down, you're actually lengthening those back muscles, and lifting the feet engages the lower abs more and can even stretch the hip flexors a little. But if you want a more focused back stretch, the book suggests reach up and grab the knees and pull the head towards the knee to stretch the back.
Oh, that's a classic. Good for relieving tension in the lower back.
Yeah.
Feels good.
Exactly. And then they suggest a little tweak to that basic crunch. They say, modify the crunch by crossing the legs.
Crossing the legs, okay. How does that change things?
Well, crossing your legs changes the angle of the movement and puts a bit more emphasis on those oblique muscles, the ones that run along the sides of your abdomen. So you're getting more of a balanced core workout. And then if you're up for a challenge, they throw in the basic stiff-legged sit-up with the hands behind the neck. Now, this one's a step up in difficulty.
Stiff-legged, so keeping the legs straight throughout.
Got it.
How does that affect the stretch?
Well, when you keep your legs straight, you're increasing the stretch in your hamstrings and hip flexors, and you're also working your abs harder to lift that extra weight. It's like a double whammy.
So it's kind of a 2-for-1?
You could say that. And then they have a modification for the sit-up as well. It's cross the arms across the body to modify the sit-up.
Okay, so instead of your hands behind your neck, you cross your arms. What's the advantage of that?
Well, crossing your arms changes the leverage you have, so you can't use momentum as much. You have to rely more on your abs to do the work. And it can make the stretch a little more controlled as you lower back down. Then they get into a stretch specifically for those obliques.
Ah, the side abs. Important for all that twisting and turning.
Exactly. And this one is, here we work the side by doing a sit-up and leaning to either side as we come up. So you're adding that side bend to really target those obliques. Then we get into a hip flexor stretch, which might seem a little out of place in the ab section, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, hips and abs are all connected in that core area.
Exactly. And the book says you can stretch the hips by lying on your side and lifting the legs straight up. Now, this mainly targets the hip abductors, but you'll also feel a stretch in the hip flexors, especially if you extend your legs slightly behind you.
And tight hip flexors can definitely mess with your lower back and posture. So stretching them can have a ripple effect on your whole core.
Exactly. And then we have a side body stretch. It's lie on the floor on your side and then supported by your hands, arch the body up to the side. This is a fantastic stretch for the obliques and the muscles along the side of your back. And then there's a more challenging variation.
You can also arch the body up to the side with using only the side muscles by crossing the arms. So basically taking away that hand support to really challenge your core.
Exactly. It forces those core muscles to work harder to stabilize and lift your body. All right, let's move on to arm stretches. Now you're going to see some overlap here with the shoulder section because, the arms and shoulders, they work together. It's all connected.
Right. It's not like they're separate compartments or anything.
Not at all. So we see that cross body stretch again. Reach across the body and grab the elbow. Still a great one for the posterior deltoid, but you definitely feel it in the arm as well. And then reach behind your body and grab the wrist of one arm. Gently pull the wrist behind your back. That one targets the internal rotators in the shoulder, but it also involves the arm.
Yep.
And of course, the variation where you lean forward, we've talked about that one, and arm circles, those are always good for general arm and shoulder mobility.
Right. Those are like the warm-up, the all-arounder.
Exactly. Then they have a stretch that's more focused on the torso and shoulders, but still engages the arms. It's, here we do a body twist, hold the elbows at shoulder height, and gently twist for side to side.
Holding the elbows high. Okay. What's the purpose of that?
Well, by holding your elbows up, you're actually engaging the muscles around your shoulder girdle and upper arms to maintain that position. So it adds a little bit of an isometric element to the stretch. Then we have that modified arm swing again. And then they get into some really small, controlled movements for the shoulder and upper arm.
Okay, so like fine-tuning things.
Exactly. Like small arm circles, holding the arms to the side makes small circles forward and backwards. These are great for those rotator cuff muscles, which are super important for stability and function in the shoulder. Oh, and of course, the tricep stretch makes another appearance. We've talked about that one. And they bring back that wall-assisted shoulder stretch, too.
I'm seeing a pattern here.
They're really trying to hammer home the connections between these different areas. And then they get into some stretches specifically for the wrists and fingers, which, let's be honest, are often neglected, but so important for everyday life.
Oh, yeah, especially for those of us who spend way too much time typing or using our phones.
Tell me about it. So, first up, they have, here we stretch wrist and fingers by placing the hand flat on the bench and pushing down with the palm of the other hand.
So that's for the top of the hand and the fingers.
Exactly. It targets the wrist extensors and the finger flexors. Then it's lock the fingers together and then gently roll them over and out.
I'm doing it right now. It feels good.
It's a nice one for improving dexterity and flexibility in those small joints. Then there's reach up and wrap the hand around the wrist and gently twist it forward and backwards. This one focuses more on the wrist itself, that flexion and extension movement. And hold the wrist pointed down and gently push on the back of the wrist with the other hand.
So pushing the hand down towards the forearm. That makes sense.
It does. It stretches those wrist flexors, the muscles on the underside of your forearm. And then there's a stretch that's a little harder to describe. It's like hold the hands together as if praying in front of the head and then drop them down in front of the body.
Oh, I know that one. It stretches the wrists and the forearms.
It does. And then they have this hard wrist twist. It's lock the fingers together and then roll the hand in a circle until the wrists are pointing forward. This one requires a bit more flexibility in the wrists, but it's great for rotational movement. And then they have you put your wrists on your hips and push them gently into your body.
I like that one. It's subtle but effective.
And they have you do it with your palms facing down as well.
Okay, so hitting it from both sides. Why the variation in hand position?
Well, by changing your hand position, you're subtly shifting the focus of the stretch. So with your palms up, you might feel it more in one part of your wrist, and with your palms down, you might feel it in another.
It's like fine-tuning the stretch.
Exactly. And then there's here we stretch the wrist by grabbing it and turning it over. More rotational movement for those wrists. Oh, and we see that tricep stretch down the back again, and the one where you lean back against a bar, and the wrist grab with a forward lean, and the wall lean, and the seated wall stretch. So much repetition.
Yeah, it's like they're really trying to emphasize how everything is connected, how one stretch can affect multiple areas.
They are. It's a holistic approach. And then they have this, start with the hands together as if praying and make a large circle. Just a nice way to get some movement and a stretch through the wrists and forearms. And then we have the wrist grab behind the back again, and that high tricep stretch and the elbow to elbow stretch. Then they get into some more targeted wrist stretches, like take the wrists and press them against each other backwards and grab the wrist and bend it down gently. And a dynamic wrist movement where you start with the wrists up high in front of the body, then bring them down to the chest. And of course, they finish with that full body reach. So yeah, lots of attention to those wrists and arms. All right, let's move on to back stretches. This is a big one for a lot of people, especially those dealing with back pain or stiffness. So someone's just looking for a few good back stretches for general well-being. What would you recommend from this book?
Okay, back stretches. Good question. Let's see. They start with a pretty gentle torso twist. It's, here we do a body twist. Hold the elbows at shoulder height and gently twist for side to side.
Good for spinal mobility without putting too much stress on anything.
Nice and easy.
Then they have a stretch they call a pelvic back stretch. It's hold onto a support and force the hips forward for the stretch. So this one's targeting both the lower back and those hip flexors, which, as we know, are often connected.
Right. Tight hip flexors can pull on your lower back and cause all sorts of problems.
Exactly. So loosening up those hip flexors can help your back feel better too. Then they have you do a standing rotational stretch.
Okay, so like twisting while standing.
Exactly. It's here we loosen the back and hips by holding our arms up at the shoulders and twisting the body to the right and left. Raising your arms intensifies the twist, especially in your upper body. And then there's hip circles.
So hold the arms on the hips and rotate the body around in gentle circles to the left and right. Like we're hula hooping without the hoop.
Exactly. It's good for loosening up the lower back and hips. Oh, and we see that tricep reach across the body again. I'm telling you, they love that stretch.
It seems to be a recurring theme. Why do you think it's mentioned so much?
Well, as we said, while it's primarily for the triceps, it also gets into those upper back muscles, so it's kind of like a bonus back stretch. Then we get into a supine bridge, which is here we loosen the back by lying with the arms directly to the sides and then arching up our hips. It's a back extension that also works your glutes, and it stretches the front of your hips.
I like bridges. They feel good.
They do. And then there's the supine spinal twist, where you, while lying on your back, keep the legs together and roll them from side to side.
Yeah.
It's a really gentle way to stretch the lower back. Then they have a stretch that requires a lot more flexibility. Roll the body up over the hips and try to touch the knees to the ground on the sides of your head. This one you definitely want to be careful with.
Yeah, that sounds a little advanced for me.
It is. It requires a lot of spinal and hamstring flexibility. And then there's a supported back extension where here we support the body with the arms on the hips while forcing the legs straight up.
So holding yourself up with your arms, how does that change the stretch?
It allows for a more controlled extension in your lower back.
Wow.
Then they get into a seated neck and upper back stretch, which is super important for posture.
Oh, yeah. Sit on a bench or a chair, and keeping the back straight, pull the head and neck back as far as possible. Good posture is key for a healthy back.
Absolutely. This stretch helps counteract that forward head posture we tend to get from staring at screens all day.
Yeah.
And then there's a hanging neck and back stretch.
Oh, I think I've seen this one. Hand the body over the edge of a bench, letting the neck relax and stretch. Keep the hands behind the back. Yeah, that's the one. It lets gravity do the work, decompressing your spine. Then they have you lie with your head over the edge of a bench, letting your arms hang down.
Lie with the head over the edge of the bench and let the arms hang out and then down. That feels more like a chest and shoulder opener. It is, but opening up your chest and shoulders can actually help release tension in your upper back. And then there's a stretch where you place the arms on the bench and lean the body up into a stretched position, and then back down to rest on the elbows. more of a dynamic stretch.
Mhm.
And then we have a wall-assisted back extension.
Using the wall again. So, lean over against the wall and gently drop the body forward, letting the back relax until it is straight. Good for people who need a little extra support.
Right. And then they have a couple of seated spinal twists. The first one is sit on the bench and place one arm on the hip, then gently turn to the right and left. Use the other arm to press on the knee for more turn.
So using your arm to, leverage the twist.
Exactly. That pressure on your knee helps deepen the rotation. And they also suggest, after you have relaxed, you can hold the knee and drop it to each side. So you're adding a bit of hip rotation to the twist.
Okay, getting fancy.
A little bit. And then there's just a simple seated side bend. Sit on a bench and take both arms and lean gently to the sides. And then they have you do that with your arms behind your head to intensify the stretch. Then we get into cat-cow stretches. Those are a classic.
Here we sit on our knees and hands.
Yeah.
First we arch the back up and then force it down as we lean forward.
Yeah.
Good for spinal mobility.
And they even have you just relax in a chair, leaning forward and letting your arms drop. Sometimes just releasing tension is all you need.
Sometimes that's the best stretch of all.
True. Then we have a seated twist with a leg cross and a standing twist against the wall and a seated cross-legged twist, and then they bring back that basic cat stretch. And a seated twist with knees dropped to the side. And finally, they end the back section with a seated forward bend.
Ooh, that's a lot of back stretches.
It is. They're really thorough. All right, ready to move on to leg stretches? This is another big one, especially if you want to improve your overall mobility and avoid feeling stiff and achy.
Leg stretches, let's do it. Where do we start?
Okay, so for maximum impact in minimal time, we're going to focus on those major leg muscles. Hamstrings, quads, hip flexors, and calves. The book starts with a hamstring stretch using support.
All right, so hold onto a bar or the wall and stand tall. Now drop a leg back and lean forward to stretch the hamstrings. I see how using a support would help with balance, but why drop the leg back?
Well, by dropping one leg back, you're able to tilt your pelvis forward a bit, which can deepen the stretch in the hamstring of your front leg. Then they have you do a quadricep stretch.
So the classic, stand tall and reach back and grab the foot, pulling it up to the buttocks. Important for runners, cyclists, anyone who tends to get tight quads.
Exactly. And then we have a hip flexor stretch.
Those hip flexors again, so important. Stand tall and reach down to grab the knee, pull it up into the chest.
Right. And then they have you do that one leaning against a wall for support. And then there's a stretch that combines the hamstring stretch and the hip flexor stretch.
Combo stretch, okay. So hold on to a support and reach back to grab the foot. Now lean over and pull up gently on the leg. Repeat to both sides. What's the advantage of doing them together?
Well, it's just more efficient. You're hitting the front and back of your thigh and hip area all at once, which is great for overall leg mobility and balance. And then we get into hip rotation stretches, which are really important for functional movement. The first one is hold the knee high to the body and then slowly turn the leg and hip to the side.
So rotating the leg outward.
Yep.
Got it.
Right. And then they have you continue that rotation, bringing the leg all the way around until it's at a right angle to your body. And then they have you do the rotation in a circle, bringing the leg all the way back so your foot is facing behind you. So you're getting both internal and external hip rotation.
Got to hit it from all angles.
Exactly. Then there's a basic hamstring stretch where you just lean over and let the body relax, try to touch the fingers to the ground, simple but effective. And then they have you do a dynamic hamstring stretch.
Here we lean over and do a step, reach back, go further back with each step. Dynamic, so we're adding some movement to the stretch.
Right. That movement helps to gradually increase your range of motion and improve blood flow to the muscles. Then we have a deep squat, which is a fantastic hip opener.
Deep squat, okay? Squat down and place the arms on top of the knees. Let the body settle here. I can feel that one in my hips and groin.
And then they have a couple of variations on the deep squat. First, they have you, after your body has relaxed, place one hand on the leg and the other on the knee and drop to the side. As you get looser, you can drop all the way to the ground. So adding a side stretch to that deep squat. And then they have you spread your legs as wide as possible, put your hands on the ground, and try to touch your head to the ground. That one's a bit more intense.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Then we have a hip and groin stretch, where you lean forward, thrust the back leg out, and drop the elbow to the knee of the front leg. Relax and drop the knee to the back knee to the ground. So you're stretching multiple areas at once. And then a wide stance hip flexor and hamstring stretch where you spread the leg as wide as possible, forward and backwards. Try to drop the hips to the ground on both sides.
So it's going wide.
And then a bent knee, wide stance stretch where you spread the legs wide, bending at the knees and lean forward. After you have relaxed, try to drop the hips to the ground. More hip and groin opening. And then we move into some seated wide-legged stretches.
All right, so sitting down now.
First, they have you just sit on the floor with your legs spread wide and lean forward. Then, once you're loosened up, they have you reach out and grab your legs and try to pull your head down to your knees. And then an even deeper variation where you rest your elbows on the ground and try to touch your forehead to the ground.
So progressively deeper stretches.
Exactly. Then we have butterfly stretches. There's the classic one where you gotta sitting on the ground, put the balls of your feet together, and while holding the ankles, gently rock the legs trying to get them to the ground. You can help by pushing down on the knees. And then, once you've relaxed, they have you try to touch your head to your ankles.
Okay, so working on that inner thigh flexibility.
Right. And then there's a seated hamstring stretch where you sit with both legs directly out to the front of the body and then reach out to try to touch the toes. As you loosen up, reach down and touch the head to the knees. And then they have a hip opener against the wall where you put one leg against the wall and cross the leg over the knee to loosen the hips.
Okay, so using the wall to help you open up those hips.
Exactly. Then we move into some supine hamstring and hick stretches. First, they have you lying on the back, reach down and grab the leg and pull it as high as you can towards your head, and then reach down and grab the knee and pull it into the chest. So hamstring and hip flexor. And then they have you put your leg up on a bar or table and lean over to touch your head to your knee.
So using a raised surface to deepen the stretch.
Exactly. Then there's a seated calf stretch and a wall-assisted hamstring stretch and just a basic calf stretch. And we see that knee to chest stretch again. And then there's a supine hip flexor stretch against a wall.
Against the wall, okay. So lots of variations using the wall as a prop.
They really like the wall. And then there's a hamstring stretch using a chair or bench and a supine inner thigh stretch against a wall and another supine hip flexor stretch and a supine hip opener where you just cross one leg over the other.
Simple but effective.
Right. And then there's a prone quadriceps and hip flexor stretch where you lie on your stomach and cross the legs, then reach up and grab the ankle of one leg and pull. And then they mention the hurdler stretch, but they actually caution against it because of the potential risk to the knee ligaments.
Yeah, good point. Not all stretches are created equal, and some can actually be harmful if you're not careful.
Exactly. It's all about listening to your body. Then they have a hip flexor stretch from a kneeling position and a pretty challenging hamstring stretch. And then a whole sequence of stretches and a seated hip opener and some alternating supine stretches for the hamstrings and hips and another supine hip opener variation and a seated hamstring stretch variation and ankle rotations and a hip abduction stretch. And the seated cross-legged twist makes another appearance and a prone hamstring stretch using a bench with a variation where you lean to the side, and a standing quadricep stretch variation. And then the seated twist with one leg extended comes back, and finally they end the leg section with a prone full body stretch.
Wow, that was a whirlwind tour of leg stretches. My goodness, so many different ways to stretch those legs.
I know, right? It just goes